I never expected my life to change this summer. I turned 23. I was stuck working a dead-end job at a coffee shop in Portland, living in a tiny, cramped studio apartment, and feeling completely lost about where my life was going. My parents had divorced when I was 5, and my mom raised me alone in Seattle. I knew my dad had remarried and started a new family, but we were never close. He felt more like a distant obligation, someone who sent birthday cards and made the occasional awkward phone call. Then one day in June, I received a message on social media that made my heart skip. I know this is random, but I think we might be half-brothers. My name is John. Our dad is Robert Chen. I'd really like to meet you, if you're open to it. I stared at the message for what felt like forever. John? I'd heard his name once or twice over the years, but my dad had always been vague whenever his new family came up. When I looked at John's profile picture, the resemblance hit me instantly. We had the same dark eyes, the same slightly crooked smile, but where I was pale and lean from spending too much time indoors, John looked athletic and sun-kissed, with strong arms visible in most of his photos. I replied carefully, "Hey John, yeah, that's kind of crazy. I'm Danny. I'd be open to meeting. What did you have in mind?" We agreed to meet at a neutral place, a park near the waterfront. That Saturday morning, I was nervous as hell. I changed my outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple gray t-shirt. What do you even wear to meet your half-brother for the first time? When I arrived at the park, I spotted him right away. John was sitting on a bench, wearing athletic shorts and a tank top, his dark hair slightly messy in that effortlessly attractive way some people just have. He stood up when he saw me walking toward him. I noticed he was a little taller than me, maybe 6'1" to my 5'11". Danny, he asked, his voice warm but unsure. John. We shook hands awkwardly, then both laughed at how formal it felt. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes, and just like that, some of my nerves faded. "This is so weird," he said, still smiling. "But, good weird, right?" "Definitely weird," I admitted. "But yeah, good weird." We sat down on the bench, and John started telling me about his life. He was 25, 2 years older than me, and had grown up in Eugene with our dad and his mom, Patricia. He had graduated from the University of Oregon with a degree in architecture and was now working at a firm in Portland, which is why he'd moved there 6 months ago. "I actually found out about you when I was 16, John said, his expression becoming more serious. "I was looking for my birth certificate for my driver's license and found some old papers of Dad's. There was a photo of him holding a baby, and on the back it said, Danny, 3 months old. I felt my chest tighten slightly. "What did he say when you asked him?" Marcus hesitated. "He said the divorce was messy, that your mom didn't want him in your life because he cheated on her with my mom." He paused before continuing softly. He seemed ashamed, but honestly, he didn't try very hard to be part of your life after that. "I'm sorry, Danny. I know that probably hurts." I shrugged, trying to act unaffected, even though his words stung more than I expected. "I mean, I kind of figured it was something like that. He sends child support. Remembers my birthday most years. That's about it." "That's not enough," John said firmly. "You deserved more than that." There was something in his voice, something protective, something sincere that caught me off guard. This was someone I had just met. Yet the way he said it made my chest feel tight in a way I couldn't quite explain. We ended up talking for 3 hours that day. We shared stories about our childhoods, our interests, and the things we hoped for in the future. I learned that John loved hiking and rock climbing, that he was obsessed with mid-century modern architecture, and that he had a terrible sense of humor filled with bad puns, which, somehow, still made me laugh. When it was finally time to leave, John pulled me into a hug. This time, it didn't feel awkward at all, nothing like our first handshake. "Let's not be strangers," he said. "I know we just met, but you're my brother. I want you in my life." "I'd like that," I replied, and I meant it more than I thought I would. Over the next few months, John and I built something that felt natural, almost effortless. We started meeting almost every week, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for dinner. Once we even tried rock climbing together. It ended in disaster when I nearly had a panic attack halfway up the wall, and John had to calmly talk me through climbing back down. But somehow, even moments like that brought us closer. "I'm sorry," I said afterward, embarrassed and still a little shaken. "I'm not really the adventurous type." "Hey, you tried something new and something scary," John replied, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "That takes courage. Next time, we'll stick to activities that don't involve heights." I appreciated how he never made me feel small for my limitations. With John, I felt accepted in a way I hadn't experienced before. My mom loved me, of course, but after the divorce, she'd always been worried about me, protective to a fault. And the few friends I had in college had slowly drifted away after graduation. Marcus was different. He seemed genuinely interested in me, constantly asking what I thought about books, movies, art, even life itself. It was during one of our coffee meets in August that I finally decided to tell him something I'd been keeping to myself. "There's something you should know about me," I said, nervously stirring my latte. "I'm gay." Marcus looked up from his espresso, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he smiled. "Okay, thanks for telling me. That's it?" I asked, surprised. "Just okay," he laughed softly. What were you expecting? Danny, you're my brother. Nothing about who you love changes that. He paused, then added casually, for what it's worth, I'm bi. I dated a guy in college for about a year. We broke up when he moved to New York. Oh, I said, feeling a mix of relief and something else I couldn't quite explain. I didn't know that. No reason you would, John shrugged. But yeah, the queer community is pretty great, right? Though I haven't really dated much since my ex. Work's been taking up most of my time. After that, our conversations became more open. We talked about coming out, relationships, heartbreak, things I'd never really shared with anyone before. I told him about my short relationship with a guy named Tyler, which had ended when he moved back to California. Marcus listened without judgment. Sometimes he offered advice, and sometimes he just listened, and somehow that meant even more. As summer turned into fall, I realized I was spending more time with John than anyone else in my life. He started inviting me over to his apartment, a sleek, modern place in the Pearl District that perfectly reflected his love for architecture. We'd watch movies, cook dinner together, or just sit and talk about everything and nothing. It felt easy, comfortable, safe. And slowly, I started looking forward to our time together in a way that felt more intense than simple brotherly connection. In October, John suggested we go on a camping trip. I found this amazing spot near Mount Hood, he said, showing me pictures on his phone. It's secluded, beautiful land. The fall colors should be incredible right now. We could use a break from the city. What do you think? I hesitated. I've never really been camping. I mean, I went to summer camp once when I was 12, but I stayed in a cabin. Even better, John grinned. I'll teach you. Come on, Danny, it'll be an adventure. I promise. No climbing involved, I agreed. Partly because I trusted John to look out for me, and partly because the idea of spending an entire weekend with him away from everything else appealed to me more than it probably should have. The drive to the campsite took about 2 hours. John had borrowed a friend's truck, and we packed it with camping gear, food, and enough warm clothes to survive freezing temperatures. He kept up a steady stream of conversation the whole way, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories from past trips. He had a way of making everything feel exciting, possible. When we finally arrived, I had to admit it was beautiful. We stood in a quiet clearing surrounded by tall Douglas fir trees, their needles glowing in shades of green and gold under the autumn light. A small creek flowed nearby, and the air felt fresh and clean, nothing like the heavy, exhausting atmosphere of the city. What do you think? John asked, watching my reaction. It's actually amazing, I admitted. Wait until you see the stars tonight, he said with a smile. No light pollution out here. It's unreal. Setting up camp, however, was a different story. I struggled with the tent poles, somehow managing to tangle them twice before John gently stepped in. Hair watch, he said patiently. It's all about understanding the structure first. See how these poles create the frame. I watched as his hands moved with confidence, assembling the tent with practiced ease. There was something almost mesmerizing about the way he worked, focused, capable, completely sure of himself. When the tent was finally up, he made it seem like I'd helped a lot more than I actually had. We spent the afternoon hiking along a nearby trail, John pointing out different trees and plants, throwing out terrible jokes that somehow still made me laugh. At one point, I slipped on loose gravel butch and caught my arm before I could fall. Careful, he said, his hand warm against my skin. Can't have you getting hurt on my watch. His touch lingered for a second longer than it needed to, or maybe I just imagined it. Lately I was having trouble telling the difference between brotherly closeness and something more, especially when it came to John. That evening, we cooked dinner over the campfire, hot dogs and beans. Simple food, but somehow it tasted better out there, under the open sky. As the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, everything around us grew quiet and golden. As the sky slowly shifted into shades of orange and pink, John leaned back on his elbows and let out a quiet, contented sigh. This is nice, he said softly. I'm really glad you came, Danny. Me too, I replied honestly. As darkness settled in, the stars began to appear more than I had ever seen before. John had been right. It was incredible. We lay side by side on our sleeping bags outside the tent, staring up at the endless sky, pointing out constellations we barely remembered from school. That's Orion, John said, tracing the shape with his finger. And that bright one over there, that's Venus. How do you know all this? I asked. My mom used to take me stargazing when I was a kid, he said quietly. Before she got sick, I turned toward him, surprised. I didn't know she was sick. Yeah, he said, his voice softer now. She had breast cancer when I was 14. She beat it. But it was a tough time. He paused, staring up at the sky. Those camping trips, looking at the stars. That was her way of reminding me there was still beauty in the world, even when everything felt scary. That's really beautiful, I said gently, but Marcus turned his head toward me, and in the dim starlight, his eyes seemed deeper, somehow like they held entire galaxies. She would have liked you, he said. She always told me family was the most important thing, even when it's complicated. Is that why you reached out to me? I asked. Partly, he admitted, but also because I wanted to know you. The idea that I had a brother out there I'd never met, it didn't sit right with me. He paused, then added quietly, and now that I know you, I can't imagine my life without you in it. My heart started pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. He suddenly sat up, cutting me off. There's something I need to say too, he said quickly. I've been trying to figure out how, but I can't keep it to myself anymore. I sat up as well, my stomach twisting with nerves. What is it? Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a habit I recognized as a sign he was nervous. This is probably going to sound crazy, he said. Maybe even wrong, but I need to be honest. He looked straight at me. Spending time with you these past few months, it's been the best part of my life. You're funny, thoughtful, kind, and the way you see the world, it makes me want to understand things differently. He hesitated, then took a breath. I know we're half-brothers. I know that makes this complicated, but, Marcus, I whispered. Please, let me finish, he said gently but firmly. I think I'm falling for you. Not in a brotherly way, in a way that makes me want to wake up next to you, to know everything about you. He stopped, his expression filled with both hope and fear. Please, say something. I stared at him, my thoughts spinning. Everything I had been feeling, everything I had tried to ignore or explain away as simple closeness suddenly made sense. The way my heart raced when he texted me, the way I found excuses to sit closer to him, the way I caught myself watching him when he wasn't looking. I feel it too, I said quietly. I've been feeling it for weeks, maybe longer. I hesitated. But John, we can't, we're brothers. Half-brothers, he corrected gently. We didn't grow up together. We didn't even know each other existed until recently. He leaned closer. Yes, we're biologically related, but we're also two adults who met and connected on our own terms. What about Dad? I asked. What about your mom? Your family? Marcus moved even closer. Close enough that I could feel his warmth in the cool night air. Dad hasn't really been there for you, he said. Not in the way he should have been. And my mom. He paused briefly. She'd want me to be happy. She'd want both of us to be happy. He looked at me seriously. I'm not saying this isn't complicated. It is. But doesn't what we feel matter too? People would judge us, I said, even as I felt myself leaning toward him. They'd say it's wrong. People judge everything, John replied softly. They judge who you love, how you live. There's always going to be someone who thinks your happiness is wrong. He reached out and took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. The simple touch sent a rush through me. I don't want to lose you, I whispered. If we do this and it falls apart, I lose my brother. Or maybe, John said gently, we gain something even more meaningful. Maybe we become something beautiful, something real. He held my gaze. I know I'm asking you to take a huge risk, but I'm willing to take it. With you, the question is I looked into his eyes and saw everything I was feeling reflected back at me: fear, hope, uncertainty, and something deeper. And in that moment, under the stars, with the quiet sound of the creek in the background, I made my choice. I leaned in slowly, giving myself every chance to stop. When our lips finally met, the kiss was soft at first and certain, testing the boundaries of something new. Then I leaned in more, letting everything I had been holding back pour into that moment. His hand gently cupped my face, his thumb brushing against my cheek, while my fingers slipped into his hair. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing harder, John rested his forehead against mine. Are we really doing this? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said, unable to hide my smile. We really are. We stayed there together under the stars, the night wrapping around us in a quiet, unforgettable way. We spent the rest of the night talking, working through our fears, our concerns, and the reality of what we were stepping into. We agreed to take things slowly, to be careful, to communicate openly, and to be thoughtful about when and how we shared our relationship with others. And when we finally crawled into the tent, zipping our sleeping bags together and settling into each other's arms, it felt right in a way nothing else in my life ever had. The next few months were both the happiest and the most complicated time of my life. Marcus and I moved forward carefully, setting boundaries and checking in with each other often to make sure we were both comfortable with how things were evolving. We decided not to tell our father right away. He had never been very present in my life, and John's relationship with him was polite but distant. There didn't seem to be any urgency to introduce that kind of complication before we were sure of where things were going. Marcus's mom, Patricia, was a different story. In December, John sat down with her and told her everything: how we had met, how our relationship had grown, and how we knew it was unconventional, but real. She cried. John told me later when he came over to my apartment, but then she hugged me and said she just wants me to be happy. He smiled softly. She wants to meet you, properly this time, not just as Robert's other son. I met Patricia a week later at her home in Eugene. She was a warm, kind woman in her mid-50s, and she treated me with curiosity and kindness, not judgment. Marcus tells me you work at a coffee shop, she said as she passed me the salad. Is that what you want to do long-term? Honestly, I'm not sure, I admitted. I studied English in college, but I never really figured out what to do with it. I've just been drifting. Danny's an incredible writer, John said, jumping in without hesitation. He just doesn't believe in himself enough. Patricia smiled, clearly noticing the affection in his voice. Well, she said gently, maybe that's something you'll figure out together. Life has a way of revealing our paths when we're ready to see them. After dinner, she pulled me aside while John cleaned up in the kitchen. I want you to know something, she said quietly. What you and John have, it's unusual, yes? Some people may not understand it. She paused, then smiled softly. But I've seen the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him. That's real love, Danny, and real love is rare. Her words stayed with me long after that night. Her acceptance meant more than I could fully express. It gave us a sense of reassurance that even if the world didn't understand, what we had still mattered. By spring, John and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural and steady. He was practically living in my studio apartment, though he kept his place in the Pearl District for practicality and appearances. We'd wake up together, make breakfast, talk about our plans for the day. He'd head to his architecture firm, and I'd go to the coffee shop. Throughout the day, we'd text, sharing little moments, small jokes, pieces of our lives that made everything feel connected. It was during one of those ordinary evenings in April that everything changed. We were sitting on my couch, Marcus working on his laptop, focused on a design project while I read beside him. Suddenly, he closed the laptop and turned toward me, his expression full of barely contained excitement. Danny, I need to show you something, he said. Okay, I replied. Marking my place in the book, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a folder. I've been working on this for months, he said. I wanted to wait until it felt just right before showing you. He handed me the phone. What I saw took my breath away. Architectural renderings of a house, but not just any house. This one was stunning. Clean lines, wide windows, an open layout that somehow felt both modern and warm at the same time. As I scrolled through, I noticed the details: a home office lined with built-in bookshelves, a bedroom overlooking trees, a kitchen designed for two people to cook together comfortably. Marcus, this is beautiful, I said. Is it for a client? He shook his head, his voice soft. No, it's for us. I looked up at him, stunned. I designed our home, Danny, he said. I found a piece of land about 30 minutes outside Portland. It's private, affordable, everything we'd need. He took a small breath before continuing. I've been saving, and with my salary and some help from my mom, I could put a down payment on the land and start building. You designed us a house, I asked, still trying to process it. I designed us a home, he corrected gently. He looked at me with complete certainty. I know it hasn't been that long, but I've never been more sure about anything. I want to build a life with you, literally, a place where we don't have to hide, where we can just be ourselves. I didn't even realize I was crying until tears started falling down my face. This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me, I said softly. Marcus reached out, wiping my tears with his thumbs, holding my face gently. So, is that a yes? He asked. Will you leave the city with me? Build this life together? Yes, I said, laughing through tears. Yes, absolutely yes. The process of buying the land and starting construction took most of the summer. I left my job at the coffee shop and began working remotely as a freelance copywriter, a change John had, and encouraged me to take. It turned out I was good at it, and more than that, I enjoyed it. It gave me the freedom to be present, to be part of something we were building together. Every weekend, we visited the construction site, watching step by step. As our future slowly began to take shape, we watched as the foundation was poured, the frame slowly rising, and piece by piece John's vision came to life. He walked me through every part of the house, explaining his design choices: how the morning light would fall perfectly across the kitchen, how the bedroom was positioned to catch the sunset just right. I put a reading nook here, he said one afternoon, pointing to a small windowed alcove off the living room. I know how much you love to read. I wanted you to have the perfect space. Every detail he had thought through made me fall even deeper in love with him. It was during one of those site visits in August that everything shifted again. We ran into our father. Robert Chen showed up unexpectedly after hearing from Patricia that John was building a house. He wanted to see what his son had been working on. The moment he arrived, his eyes landed on Hassan. The Wajan's arm rested naturally around my waist. I watched the realization slowly spread across his face. Marcus, he said carefully. What's going on here? Dad, John replied calmly, not moving his arm. Danny and I are together. We're building this house for us. Our father's face tightened, shifting with emotion. You can't be serious. He's your brother. Half-brother, I said, finally finding my voice. And we're both adults who can make our own choices. This is wrong, he snapped. It's we didn't grow up together, John said firmly, even though I could feel a slight tremor in him. We met as adults. We fell in love as adults. You don't get to decide that, Robert said sharply. Actually, John replied, his voice steady, we do. You weren't there for Danny when he was growing up, and you haven't exactly been present in my life either. He took a breath. You don't get to walk in now and tell us how to live. I'm your father, Robert said. Biologically, yes, John answered, but that's about it. There was a long, heavy silence. I'm not trying to fight with you, John continued more quietly. You're welcome to be part of our lives if you can accept us. If not, then we'll have to keep some distance. That's your choice. Robert looked between us, his expression filled with conflict and confusion. and something that almost looked like regret. Finally, he shook his head. "I need time," he said. "Take all the time you need," I replied softly. He left without another word. Marcus and I stood there in the unfinished structure of our future home, holding on to each other. "Well, that went about as expected," John said with a nervous laugh. "I'm proud of you," I told him. "I'm proud of us." We moved into our finished home in October exactly. 1 year after that camping trip, Dada was even more beautiful than I had imagined. Sunlight poured through the large windows, warming the wooden floors and bright walls. Every detail reflected John's talent and his understanding of what would make us happy. Patricia helped us move in. Along with a few close friends, John had carefully opened up to about our relationship. The reactions were mixed. Some people were accepting, others were unsure. A few were openly critical, but the people who truly mattered, the ones who saw how much we cared for each other, stood by us. 2 new beginnings, Patricia said that first night, raising her glass in our kitchen, to my son and his partner, and to the beautiful home they've built together. We clinked glasses, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for her, for John, for everything we had created. Robert eventually came around, though it took time. He showed up one day in December with an awkward apology and a housewarming gift. His acceptance wasn't perfect, and I don't think he ever fully understood but he tried, and that effort meant more than anything he had given me before. As winter settled in, John and I found our rhythm. I worked from the office he had designed for me, writing copy and slowly working on a novella story about finding connection in unexpected places. Marcus spent his days at his firm and came home to me every evening. We cooked together, experimented with new recipes, laughed when things didn't turn out right. We watched movies under blankets, sharing quiet, comfortable moments. Life felt steady, real. Hours. One evening in January, we were sitting in the reading nook he had built for me when John asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Choosing this, choosing us." I closed my book and looked at him, the man who had come into my life unexpectedly and changed everything. "Not for a second," I said honestly. "Do you Never," he replied without hesitation. "Before you, I was just going through the motions. Everything looked good on paper, but something was missing." He smiled softly. "Finding out I had a brother was surprising, but falling in love with youth, that's what made everything feel complete. What we have is something rare," I said quietly. "Something bigger than expectations. Bigger than what people think love is supposed to look like." Marcus pulled me closer, and I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Outside, snow began to fall, gently covering the world around us. I'm writing this now from that same reading nook 3 years later. So much has changed, and yet the core of what we share hasn't. Last year, John proposed. We couldn't make it official in a legal sense, but we held a small commitment ceremony in our backyard, surrounded by the people who truly supported us. Patricia cried happy tears. Even Robert showed up hand this time. He smiled. My novel was published 6 months ago, a fictional version of our story that resonated with more people than I ever expected. People reached out, sharing their own experiences, saying they felt seen. Marcus recently made partner at his firm. He's now designing projects that focus on sustainability and community, something he's always cared deeply about. And every evening, he still comes home to me. We still face judgment sometimes. Not everyone understands. Some people never will. But we've built something real, a life filled with love, respect, and quiet happiness. Looking back at that night under the stars, I remember how afraid I was. Afraid of what choosing him would mean, afraid of everything that could go wrong, but the real risk would have been walking away. That night, John showed me something important. That love isn't always simple, but it's worth it. That family isn't just defined by the past, it's something we build. That happiness sometimes requires courage. He showed me that home isn't just a place, it's a person. And in John, I found both. Every day, I choose him, and every day, he chooses me. That's what we built together. A love that didn't follow expectations, but created its own meaning. And this is our story, shared for anyone who needs to hear that love, in all its unexpected forms, can still be something beautiful.